Hello and welcome to another edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. As always, I'm your host, Justin Largen, and we are the show on the Serious Angler Network that's dedicated to all things kayak fishing. We have talked a lot in the past about bass fishing specifically. We're going to shift gears a little bit tonight and talk some saltwater. This will be our second saltwater episode. We've got a great guest lined up, but I wanted to take a minute before we get to our guest uh, and just kind of reflect on the year a little bit. Had a lot of fun this year. We're a little past 1 full year of Kayak Fishing Weekly. I definitely have not done the best job of recording every week. We definitely did not get 52 episodes out in this first year, but we did okay. And hopefully you enjoyed the content that we did bring. I plan to be more dedicated and disciplined in this upcoming year in 25. We plan to have something for you every week, a lot more consistent with the content. I want to thank everybody who's listened in the past year. Everybody who's whether you're listening or watching or both. And along those same lines, we announced it on Instagram today also, and I think I mentioned it in last week's episode at the start. We have moved the YouTube page. We now have a dedicated Kayak Fishing Weekly YouTube page. Before it was included in the Serious Angler channel, and I think this is probably a good thing. It will unclutter the channel a little bit so that folks who are looking for the specific Serious Angler content can find it. And then folks that are looking for the Kayak Fishing Weekly content can find that. We've got our own dedicated page. We don't have a huge following just yet. I'm hoping it'll grow. But if you do listen or watch via YouTube, then we do have a new home. And again, Kayak Fishing Weekly. Check us out over there. Give us a like or a follow if you enjoy it. If you listen via the Apple Podcast or Spotify or any of the other platforms, we are not going anywhere. Same place. But thank you again to everybody who's listened over the past year. It's been a lot of fun for me, and I'm looking forward to 2025. This episode, if I'm doing the math correctly, will be our final episode of 2024. So 2025, got some big things planned, but we still got one more show to do, and I'm looking forward to it for a couple reasons. One, I actually have a guest tonight, so it's not just me rambling on. And two, we're tackling a fun topic, something that I don't know all that much about. I'm kind of a bass fishing junkie. I've done some saltwater, uh, but I'm no expert. I've caught a few saltwater fish, but my experience is very limited, especially compared to our guest tonight. Uh, he's a fantastic saltwater angler, fantastic bass angler, and I'm excited to pick his brain a little bit and hopefully learn some different species that I'm not familiar with, and maybe some ways to catch them. But our guest Brian Nelli, he is like I mentioned, he's a full-time guide, and he's won a bunch of tournaments in the saltwater space and in the bass fishing space. So yeah, I don't think we could have picked a better guest for this. So I'll go ahead and get him on. There we go. Brian Nelli. Brian, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be here.
Appreciate you making some time. I know it's a busy time of year for everybody, but it's kind of like I was saying at the intro. I think you're about the best guest at least that I know of for a topic like this, because you actually guide, like you teach people for a living how to fish.
Mhm.
I was going through it's pushing water underscore kayak fishing on Instagram, and then pushing water kayak charters. Did I get that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I was just scrolling through today, kind of looking at some of your content, and I saw, let's see, sailfish, Spanish mackerel, kingfish. Is it clown knife fish?
Yes.
Those things look cool.
Yeah.
Is that technically a saltwater species?
No, it's freshwater.
Okay. All right. So we won't talk about them. I saw Jack Crevalle, yellowfin tuna, a couple other freshwater species. I saw peacock bass, snakehead, redfish, wahoo, snook, tarpon, mahi, and albacore tuna. And I think that was just looking at maybe like a 6-month period.
Yeah. We're pretty lucky where I'm at. We get a lot of different species.
So it's southern Florida. So you've got the benefit of some warm weather, at least warmer than most of us have this time of year.
Yeah.
Is it pretty much a 12 months out of the year deal where guys are where you've got clients coming out there and catching fish?
Yeah, yeah, we fish all year long. It don't get too cold down here. Sometimes we might get a few nights into the 30s every maybe 5 years, but typical cold time in the winter, maybe in the 50s. Like we had a couple days in the 50s at night around here the last few days. But
Okay.
today was 80 degrees is high.
Oh, I'm jealous. Yeah, I normally when I'm off work, I'm fishing or doing, working on tackle, doing something fishing related. I know it got down in the teens overnight, and I think the high was like 30s today here, which is still not as bad as a lot of places.
Yeah,
Like I know Bailey, some of the guys up in New York in the Midwest, I can't imagine dealing with ice for as long as they have to.
yeah, ice and snow.
Um, One of the cool things, at least in my very limited experience with saltwater, is at least to me they taste better. Um, so I guess my first question, I want to know what your favorite saltwater fish is to eat.
Um, I mean, right now we get a fish called pompano, a Florida pompano, and they're probably one of the best to eat. Along the same kind of texture and flavor would be cobia. And cobia can kind of stretch up into the Carolinas and Virginia as well. Those guys get that way, but yeah, I prefer like that white kind of more of a thicker flake kind of meat that they have with the pompano and cobia. That's my favorite to eat.
Okay, awesome. Now, what about to catch? Like,
Uh, I don't really have a favorite. I like doing different things. I don't like trying to go catch the same thing all the time. So if you would ask me now, I'd say I like catching pompano because that's what like I'm targeting, and we don't get them all year long. So the fish that kind of are not here all the time, I enjoy catching. Like we don't get a lot of tuna throughout the winter and in the fall. So like in the spring when we get the big 20, 30 pound tuna, that's they're fun to catch because again we're not fishing for them all year long. So those are always just the different species that we get throughout the year are the best things for me.
and is it the same water and just different fish are moving through at different times a year?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Different migrations.
That's I don't know. I guess that's something I'm not used to with freshwater.
Right.
Uh, I mean, maybe I guess you get some trout or something that'll run up, or the landlocked striper that'll run up the river. But
Hmm.
yeah, I've never experienced those types of migrations. Is that something you just get used to, or
Yeah. It's always, okay, November's coming. So it's going to start to bring in some cold fronts and push some different species down. Again, we'll get more of the pompano, bluefish. Sheephead fishing gets better. Just it's cold water species as I would refer to it as, but it's just during that time of year they start to come through more. And typically people want to say that the winter times sailfish season, which it is. We get more bigger groups of sailfish offshore that come through with the north north cold fronts that come down and push some cold air down and push the fish down. But we catch sailfish year round, but we do get bigger packs of them in the wintertime.
okay? That's one of the ones that I want to catch. I've never been around sailfish. Um, yeah, there's a couple other ones that look cool, like tarpon with the crazy jumps.
Yep.
But between I don't know which looks cooler to me, that the tarpon and the sailfish. I feel like those are the ones that like they're atop my bucket list for ones that I'd like to catch at some point.
You're not alone.
And is that what a lot of your clients are looking to do?
Yeah, it's most requested.
Okay. And is that I guess I'm curious because I watching your videos and some of them, you can kind of see the I guess the land in the background. It's hard to tell how far out you are though. In other ones, there's no background at all. I'm curious, are you are you relatively close in, or are you miles and miles out offshore?
No, we're worth a mile is about it.
Okay.
So again, we're lucky to where we're at. We're actually the closest to deep water on the whole coast of the U.S. So right where we go fish offshore, it's, you know, it comes in the closest it does anywhere else on the whole coast.
Gotcha. So it's accessible for. I mean, I'm trying to think of the biggest stuff I've fished bass fishing. I went up to Erie once. I don't know that I ever made it a mile offshore though.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like it's not far, I know, for saltwater guys, but for a freshwater guy, especially somebody that fishes, farm ponds and little small stuff, I could still see that being intimidating. Is there? I guess do you have any advice for getting started? What do people like? What should they plan for, or like what do they need to know to kind of get out there that far away from the bank?
There's in my area, there's biggest thing is there's typically current. So you need to be aware of where you're launching and where you might end up. You might not be able to come back to where you launched from. So having a float plan is, you know, a number one thing. Especially if you're starting out, you probably don't want to go out by yourself. Hiring a guide like myself, or at least going with a buddy, is a good idea, so that you have somebody out there that, if you do get in trouble with for some reason, that can help you out. But a float plan is number one. And in the area we're in too, is that you can't just launch and take out anywhere you want. There's not a lot of public access. So you kind of, again, need to know where you think you're going to go and end up, and or be able to get back to.
Okay, so it's not unlike a river float.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I never even considered that. It definitely adds a wrinkle. Um, but are you? If I'm not mistaken, you're sponsored by Newport, so
Yeah.
I know you've got a motor. But is that something that people need to have, or is it pedal drive? Is that sufficient?
No, when I first started going offshore, I was in a paddle boat. I used to use the Hobie Quest. So we did that for years, and we were paddling out there and paddling back, you know, but I was also a lot younger. So now I think if I went out there now, I wouldn't be able to do that. But definitely a pedal boat is a big advantage, obviously. Again, I take people out that have, one, maybe never fished before, and two, never kayaked before, but putting them in a pedal boat, especially a Hobie kayak, is it makes it easy for them to get through the day.
Okay,
But
I've
the motor definitely is not needed. Um, I do take the motor sometimes if I'm going to planning on doing like a 8-10 mile kind of thing, like out. You may drift 8-10 miles, which is a normal trip, but you're not pedaling 10 miles straight, you know, as a constant thing. But if I'm going to do a long trip, you know, generally still be by myself, I'll do a 8 to 10 mile kind of thing out, out to the east, out to deep water, and then, you know, have the motor bring me back as well. So
Gotcha. I could see the benefit, and I think I spent about 10 years before ever getting a pedal drive. And I'm in a Hobie Outback, and I've really liked it. It was when I first started the paddle boat. Just anytime you get wind, it was extremely frustrating for me trying to set up on a target, cast to it, and then just get pushed off by the wind.
yeah,
Uh, but it was like night and day getting that Hobie. I was kicking myself for not doing it sooner, for being stubborn. But
I would do. I used to
but
be able
it
to say, I used to brag to people like, I can paddle faster than these guys can pedal. You know,
yes. Yeah,
but
look at me. I'm big and bad, and I'm doing it the right way. And
yeah, yeah.
no, it's
Once you get
I
in, you're like, oh, I'm not going back to that paddle.
yeah, and I'll still do it like every once in a while, but I can't imagine doing it in the big water like where you are.
Yeah.
Um, Something else that I'm curious on is like when you get out there, like how deep? You say you get about a mile offshore. Are you talking? I assume it's significantly deeper than some of our lakes.
Yeah. So typically, again, it depends on what's going on. Things change. Fish are in different areas and different times of the year. But typically, we're gonna start fishing in like 80 feet. Again, we'll bounce around and kind of start in different things. Maybe 60. Maybe we'll start right on the beach, depending on what we're targeting. But typically if we're going, pelagic fish wise, we're going to start 80, 90 feet. That's kind of typically where the reef is going to start to drop off to deeper water. Now we don't have a deep drop off like say the Bahamas where you get to 90 feet and it drops out like 100 feet real fast. It drops, but it's only like maybe a few feet of relief and then slowly gets deeper from there. It's not a big drop like a cliff out there. But yeah, typically that feet you're out there and you're trolling from 90 foot to 200 feet and kind of going back and forth through there.
Okay. So are electronics a must?
At least the GPS, yeah, you would want. You don't need nothing fancy. A cheap $100, GPS fish finder will do just fine, just so you know what depth you're in. You're not necessarily like looking for fish, which on some of the better units you can spot different kinds of fish. Like when we're targeting tuna, you can see them and be able to drop a jig down. Like when we're vertical jigging, I mark a lot of kingfish you'll see, and then you'll see a sail come underneath you, and or sharks. Obviously those bigger marks will be a sail or shark, but
Okay.
you necessarily don't need to be able to see the fish. Just more of a depth thing and visually looking of what's happening out there, what conditions you have, if there's any current rips or weed lines or something floating, you kind of want to target around those things. Anything that's different than the thousands and thousands of miles of open water. looking
Gotcha.
something different.
Okay. I guess that takes me to a different question. Like thinking, like safety concerns. You mentioned GPS. Do folks need to? I mean, obviously a PFD, that's a no-brainer,
Yeah.
especially for being that far out. But what about stuff like, are you taking a foghorn or any type of what is it, radar or like a CB radio kind of thing?
No, your cell phone service works where we're at. I do use a VHF radio if I have a larger group. I typically don't. I'm not always bringing that, but that is a good thing to have. So if you do get in trouble, you can call the Coast Guard or whatever. If you got a buddy with you, you can get in touch with them easily and quickly. But yeah, life jacket, VHF radio, a flag obviously is a big one. Um, and I got a whistle. I just use a whistle. I'm not usually using a horn. I've used a horn in the past before, but then after a couple trips, it just get rusted out and it kind of becomes useless. So make
Gotcha.
make sure you got a whistle at least that you can blow on and that's an easy access. I usually have it attached to my life jacket right here in front of me. So, but yeah,
I
that's
like that.
one of the biggest concerns. People always ask, the first thing is like they're asking about what about sharks, but your biggest concern is the boats because there is a lot of traffic and a lot of people don't pay attention to where they're driving when they're out there. So biggest thing is always keeping your head on a swivel and your ears open. I always cringe at people that I see out there listening to music or have headphones in and are not listening to what's going on around them because they can't hear a boat coming up on them. So that's a big thing, is just to be able to be aware of your surroundings.
I hadn't even thought of something like that. It at least from some of the videos that I've seen of yours, it looks like you're just out there and there's,
No,
you've got, like you're
yeah,
saying, miles and miles and there's nobody around. But I hadn't even thought about the other boats aspect of it because I've talked to bass fishermen. I know there's sometimes some not necessarily bad blood, but the kayak guys will talk bad about the glitter boat guys, and the bass boat guys don't like the kayaks because they don't see them.
yeah,
I've talked to some of those guys just from fishing lakes, and they're going into the sun in early or late. You got that glare on the water, and anything that we can do to help them see us, I
yeah,
think is good for everybody.
for sure.
But
But
you,
with us, and again with the offshore salt, is most of these boat guys are trolling. So especially your general weekender, and I'm not trying to call people out that go out there for only on the weekends, but the guys will be out there just trolling, and there will be 2, 3 guys on the boat, and they're all looking behind them, staring at their lines that they're trolling, and no one's driving the boat. So it's again, it's a matter, you can do all you want with being visible and whatnot, but you also got to be paying attention for yourself as well, because the next person might not be paying attention for you. So
you got a guy fighting a fish off the back of the boat and everybody's paying attention to that and not where they're going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, you mentioned sharks. That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask because I've seen some of the videos and I think it's a tiger shark. And I don't know if it was East Coast or West Coast. I've seen a couple different videos of like where the shark's following or one where the shark comes up and like bumps the boat.
Hmm.
You ever had any fun encounters like that?
Not unwarranted. Like they're not just gonna come up and hit you for no reason. We've had a couple. Typically, this will happen in like July when we get a lot of the big bonita or false albacore that come through. They got big schools of them, and the sharks are eating on them. So typically, what will happen if you're fighting a fish and a shark comes on trying to eat that fish, and that fish is trying to hide. He's going to try to hide on your boat. So that fish is running to your boat, and that shark is right behind him, and he can bump into your boat trying to get run into that fish. So during that time of year, we try to make sure that we're paying attention to if there's anything chasing the fish, and you can typically tell pretty quick if it's being chased by a shark or whatnot. But yeah, we've had some get bumped. Some people get bumped, when the shark's chasing after a fish, which is one of my biggest fears. I can picture it in my head of something bad happening, like just like that. But yeah, thankfully we haven't had anything. I've been guiding out there for 14 years now, so knock on wood, no serious things have happened.
Yeah, it probably helps being in a PA or a a a similar size, like, stable kayak where if you do get bumped, it's not necessarily you're going over.
Right.
Um, I've I I've not spent a bunch of time in a PA, but I know it's more stable than my Outback, and I'm not the biggest guy, but I can stand up and do a lot in an Outback. So I can only imagine how much more stable the PA is, or even some of these newer ones like God, what's the big one? We started carrying in the store, the Bonafide, the XTR.
Yeah, yeah,
That it looks like a John boat to me, but
yeah, yeah.
I imagine it's gotta be stable.
I would hope.
I can't remember, I don't wanna get it wrong, but I think it's something like 700. I wanna say it's over 700-pound weight capacity, which
Yeah.
is about as much as I've seen on any, at least as listed as a rating for any kayak, but,
Right.
um I guess I wanna get into techniques next. Like, I know bass fishing, you can kinda make it as simple or complicated as you want. You can take something like a fluke and just go fish the shallows, or you can, dive into, I don't know, you can be like me and spend tens of thousands of dollars on lures and, play around with different things. Is it simpler on the saltwater side?
You can. Yes, a simple answer. Yes. Like when I was getting into the bass fishing thing and seeing how like a majority of the tournament anglers, especially, go crazy on like little simple, little different colors and every different kind of lure. It's like I still have the mindset of I don't think that's necessary, but people have their way of thinking, and that's great. But yeah, I'm more of
I
a I'm a more of a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. So I keep it basic, basically with most stuff. So I mean, with we do a lot of live bait trolling. That's going to be your best way to get most of the fish. But when you're using lures and things like that, it's basic colors of just a sardine color or something silvery and blue and pink. Pink is a good color. But when we're vertical jigging or trolling plugs, it's basically anything that's shiny and flashy is going to get attention and get bit. So
looks Something that looks like the bait fish they're eating.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can find some videos of people going out there and jigging with a wrench, like a normal silver wrench catching fish. Again, it's something that's moving and flashing, and that gets them to bite it. So
Like, like, do they have a hook in it? Like,
yeah, yeah.
they rig a hook.
Yeah, look on YouTube. You'll see. There's a bunch of people that. One of my good buddies, Palm Beach Pete, I think, is one of the first one that had done that and videoed it. But there's some other guys that got videos out there now too. But yeah, I think they drill a hole in it, attach a hook, and just drop that down and work it back up and catching fish.
No,
Yeah.
I gotta watch that. because as I've gotten older, I think I'm more like you, where I think color matters less and less.
Right.
But I still catch myself getting sucked into the like, oh, they come out with a new color and a particular bait
Yeah.
that I like, and I'm like, ooh. And I think it's even worse with baits that I'm bad at. Like if it's a bait that I like, jerk baits is something I'm not the best at, but I
Yeah.
have a ton of them because I'm like, oh, maybe this color will be the thing that makes me catch fish on it all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the technique or the the cadence or whatever. It's the magic lure theory or phenomena or whatever that I
Yeah.
still catch myself getting sucked into. But so lures, you keep it fairly simple, just something you said that looks flashy.
Mm.
Uh, is there any bait type? Is it primarily vertical jigging that you're doing, or is there anything with plastics?
Um, during the spring and fall, I'll usually carry like a pitch bait, which will be a lot of times I'll have a DOA bait buster, which is kind of looks like a mullet, a small finger mullet. Soft plastic that way. You could even do a bigger jerk bait, like not I always say jerk bait, but a fluke. Um,
Okay.
that'll work. But yeah, more so that plastic type stuff will be for a pitch bait if something comes up and you can be able to sight cast it and throw at it. That's usually what I'll use for that.
Cool. So is it actually cleaner out there, like where you can actually see the fish
Oh
that
yeah.
are coming up and moving around?
Typically, especially this time of year when we don't get a lot of rain and that dirtier water is not getting dumped out there. You can see the reef in 60, 70 feet. So there's a lot of
Whoa.
yeah.
Okay, so it's like Great Lakes gin clear.
Right. Yeah.
That's cool. What about top water? Is there is there ever a top water bite or a consistent one?
Poppers in the spring. I'll throw poppers. Again, like we'll troll a live bait behind us, and as we're going, I'll be bombing a popper out there. Um,
Okay.
that during that time, you can get a mahi or a tuna to come up and bust that, or even a kingfish.
How I guess how far will they run to chase something in water that clear?
I mean, they're. I wouldn't. I mean, I've used to video. I used to have one of those trolling cameras. I don't know. I don't know what they probably have different companies now. I think it was called like a wolf camera or something like that that you could like tie in line with your line.
Okay.
And I would do that with some lures, and you would see it really taught me a lot too of how fish respond to baits, and which I didn't realize before that. But you would see, especially some of the tunas, like and a lot of fish, they come like flying up from the bottom, like. And honestly, I don't know how far they can see. I'm not really an expert on that, but seeing those videos that I took of that and seeing how they come up straight from the bottom, and I would imagine that they can see a good 40, 50 feet, especially when it's clean. Typically if I'm marking fish on my fish finder, I want to try to get it, I don't want that bait below those fish. I want them above, as they should be looking up. They're going to be looking up more so than down. And I want to get that bait within 10 feet, typically 10, 15 feet of them. But and in the furthest distance that they're going to come chase for it, I don't know that answer. But again, if it's crystal clear, I would imagine it's a good 40, 50 feet.
That's cool. And you're saying that most of these species are feeding up.
Right.
So so you're not doing a lot of bottom dragging or hopping on the bottom. It's keeping it down, but not all the way down, if I'm
Yeah,
understanding that right.
pelagic wise, I mean, if we're fishing for snapper or grouper or something like that, we'll be putting stuff on the bottom. But typically, fish are like, again, when I did those videos, and in general, fish are going to be wanting to attack from the bottom, so they're going to come up below the fish and try to hit it, not from above and come down on it.
Gotcha. Um, I I'm trying to think of how to word this. I don't want to make it sound like like your clients wouldn't necessarily know. Like I'm trying to think of a nice way to word it, but like maybe like this biggest mistake that you see clients or somebody that they'd be like me, new to saltwater fishing, like biggest mistake that we would make, something that we can try to avoid, maybe.
Mm, I mean, the one I'd always say is it because you'll get some guys that they have kayak fishing experience and they kind of do the things that they like to do, but they come and hire me and want to catch something that we catch all the time, but then they insist on doing it their way when I'm trying to tell them like this is how you should try to do it, and they don't want to listen to that. So the biggest thing is listen to your guide.
I
when
like
you,
that.
yeah, when you come and you're trying to catch the fish that we always catch, it's best to just listen to our suggestion of what to do.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I think my first time down in Florida, it would have been 2018. Uh, my younger brother came down to fish, and he doesn't have a kayak, but I was fishing out of mine, so I booked a guide for a couple days. We went on the Everglades one day and went down on Okeechobee one day,
Hmm.
and I very stupidly, it was nasty cold front came through, and I was stubborn, so I know we're going to catch them on lures. I want to fish with lures.
Yeah.
And the guide, he's like, I could get some shiners. It's going to be tough fishing. If you guys want to catch something, we got the shiners. And I regret telling him no, because we ended up catching like maybe 2 fish that day.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's looking, a couple hundred yards away at the another charter buddy of his that's got clients with shiners, and they're catching big fish, and
Wow.
we're sitting there just shivering, catching nothing. But yeah, I can totally relate. Listen to the guide. They know more than you.
Not necessarily. I'm always willing to listen to people's suggestions and what they think, but again, that's when we've kind of perfected what kind of works in certain situations. So you might want to take that suggestion.
I like it. You mentioned trolling earlier. Is that something like I've been on a saltwater charter where they're trying to catch up here my way in the Chesapeake Bay. That's something they do a lot for striper, the big
Hmm.
striper that are coming up these I guess into the Chesapeake to spawn. Is that something that you can do out of a kayak?
What do you mean? Like,
Like trolling with a Alabama rig or something like that, or is it more just drifting live bait?
yeah, I mean, again, if you're talking offshore, in the ocean, like if we're gonna troll something, it's gonna be like a Yozuri plug, it's a lipped plug.
Gotcha.
And then otherwise, yeah, if we're trolling live bait, it's not necessarily drifting. We are moving, but we're slow trolling. We're going to be moving like a mile and a half an hour kind of thing.
Okay. Trying to maintain a specific speed for
Right.
that bait.
Yeah. Yeah. We're trolling a plug, obviously with a lipped plug, you're going to have to move a little faster. So that's, especially again, for people that are new, we generally use live bait because someone to try to get them to troll, 3 to 4 miles an hour all day long is not going to work out very well for them.
Gotcha. Is there I saw one of your videos, goggle eye. Is that one of the like prevalent bait fish in the salt?
Yeah, a typical bait that we'll use. They're real hardy baits, so they'll last all day long on a hook without, you don't have to worry about them dying. We do, in the spring, we'll use pilchard sometimes, some thread fins, um, man, blue runners as well. I necessarily don't like using blue runners all the time because they don't troll as nice. They kind of fight you more than a goggle eye does. Typically a goggle eye, you can put it out there and he'll, after a while, being, getting used to being on the leash, he'll kind of calm down and just swim with you. But that a blue runner typically tries to like get on his side and kind of dig on you, and sometimes they'll pull off the hook and wear a hole through their nose and come off the hook. So
Gotcha. Um, shoot, I had a question and I've already forgotten it. I think it had to do with yeah, bycatch. Like I know it's happened to me, bass fishing, like certain baits, you're imitating some type of bait fish, like with a jerk bait or even something like a spinner bait. You'll catch other species. Is that pretty common with the saltwater? Like, do you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to catch, or a target species, or are you running into multiple species out there more frequently?
again, for offshore in the ocean, we're running, we'll jump around a little bit different times of the year, but typically we're trolling for whatever's coming through. Again, different times of year, you're going to get different species. Right now in the wintertime is more so sailfish. Kingfish are going to be your main two, and with some random spells of wahoo and mahi. Now come the spring, like May, end of April, May, June, July, then you'll start getting into having more tuna around, where that's going to be more of a common catch along with those other species. But yeah, again, we're typically I mean, you could be surprised sometimes. And again, we don't typically, you mentioned yellowfin, but we don't really get yellowfin here. It's kind of a rare occasion. The tuna that we get is mainly blackfin, and then your false albacore and skipjack tuna.
Okay.
We do randomly get yellowfins, and that typically happens like February, March time. You'll start seeing some popping up on social media. But yeah, there's not. I mean, you'll get surprised some days and be, because again, a wahoo catch is kind of a random one that will generally, it's a good surprise to catch one. But there's not really necessarily a bycatch, I would say.
Okay.
Now,
What?
inshore wise, again, typically it's going to be snook, jacks, and trout. If we go a little further north or in our northern region where we fish at, you go get into some redfish. But and again, different seasons, like I said, and right now pompano would be the different things that come through at different times of year.
Okay. And are the regulations pretty simple to follow as far as like what the size limits are and what you're allowed to keep and eat? Is
Yeah,
it
it's all easily accessible online, so it's not.
gotcha?
I'd say the limits are fairly fair um, for the most part. I would think the only one thing I still complain about is the limits on the mahi mahi. I think it's still too many that they allow you to keep, but other than that, I think yeah, it's easy to find the regulations online, and it's not too hard to figure out.
And are there is it mostly catch and keep, or are there some species that are like the sailfish?
Yeah,
Are those primarily catch and release?
yeah, we let them go. Everything else we do keep. If a client doesn't want it, then it'll go to my neighbor or somebody else. So
Nice.
it doesn't get wasted. It's always eaten by somebody.
That's awesome. And that's one of the things that has me interested in the salt is basically being able to fill the freezer.
Yeah,
Those are significantly bigger fish than most of what I catch in the freshwater, and I think they taste better.
right.
But that I still think I caught out of the surf at the Outer Banks speckled trout years ago,
Hmm.
and I mean they weren't massive, but they were decent. So they were legal, and I remember filleting them and cooking them that day and eating them, and I still think that was some of the best tasting fish I've ever had. That and fresh striper.
Yeah.
So I've a lot of the species that you're catching, I don't have experience with, but I can only imagine that stuff is phenomenal.
Well,
Uh,
if anything fresh is going to taste good. So
fair enough.
there's a lot of the species that you can freeze, like a lot of stuff we catch like kingfish, and I'd say even mahi. I don't even like to freeze and eat. Things get definitely don't taste as good once they're frozen.
Gotcha. Well, anything that I'm overlooking, I know, like I said, I'm kind of a noob with the saltwater. Anything else that maybe somebody that's a newcomer to it should know getting started that I've neglected to ask?
Well, for speaking to like someone that's coming from a northern state, like I grew up in Illinois and Chicago area, so when I first moved down here, a lot of the bass fishing type lures and things will work just as good in your inshore saltwater situations. So if you're going to come down and try to figure some things out by yourself, you don't need to go all crazy and go and try to buy different stuff. Like a lot of your typical bass lures will work just fine for a snook, out redfish type thing situation. Um, and fishing inshore again is not much different than fishing a lake. There's tides and things like that, and but that's something you can learn pretty quick. The only thing I would say if you want to venture offshore is to have a plan and be safe. There's a lot more things that can happen out there. So
Awesome. Well, dude, I really appreciate you making time for me. I know we're right here around the holidays. I don't want to keep you too long. But I do want to give you a minute. We talked about your charter. Um, where can people find you again? And then is there anybody that you want to shout out? Any of your long list of sponsors?
Yeah, Instagram again. I think you said Pushing Water Kayak Fishing. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, everything, Facebook. So you'll be able to find me. There's Pushing Water Fishing, Pushing Water Kayak Charters. The website's tckayakfishing.com. But again, if you Google that Pushing Water, you'll find me. Yeah, I've had some great sponsors over the year. Hobie Eyewear obviously has been good to me. Hobie Kayaks I've been with for a long time. And my whole fleet is Hobie kayaks. And again, I would not be able to do what I do without having a pedal drive kayak like a Hobie, getting people out there for the first time. Newport's been great. Obviously, me venturing into the bass tournament stuff, that's been a big help. Getting some pre-fishing done, being able to cover a big lake. Crowder Rods. I got a bunch of different people. They've all been helpful. I'm not going to run through the whole list for you guys, but that's about it for me.
Awesome. And yeah, I know we were talking saltwater here, but you are no slouch in the bass fishing world either. You won the Hobie TOC, and your record in terms of consistency is a lot better than mine. And I've been chasing bass a long time, so you're no slouch. I feel like you catch them just as good in the freshwater as you can in the salt.
I like to compete, and that's what it drives me. It doesn't matter what we're fishing for or what we're competing with. I like competing against people, and if I can do it in fishing, that's great. Even again, if it's from the smallest fish to the biggest fish, I enjoy it. So
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Brian. I hope to see you out. I'm assuming you're going to be fishing some of the upcoming tournaments, the Bassmaster one.
yeah, it's disappointing that we don't have more trails this year like we have in the past. But
Yeah.
I as of right now, I might only be able to do one of the Bassmaster. Obviously, the one in Florida I'll be at, but I'm not sure how many of the other ones I'll be able to get to. It's kind of spread out this year, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, but Florida, it's for me, it's a chance to escape the cold for a little while. So I'll definitely be down there. I hope to run into you down there on the Kissimmee chain.
For sure, man.
Thanks again, Brian. Brian Nelli, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I enjoy picking his brain. Hopefully, everybody else got some good information out of that. I'm going to go back and listen to it again, I think, at some point. But yeah, good stuff. And thank you again to Brian. All right. Now it is time for Yakking on a Budget. Um, I reached out in one of the more recent episodes, asking for tips from you all. Anybody out there that's got cool tips, whether it's money saving or just kind of a cool hack that you've come up with that the rest of us would benefit from. And actually, Brandon Yoder reached out. For anybody that hasn't seen the episode, he was a guest earlier this year, and we talked a lot about DIY stuff, budget saving. It was a really fun episode. So if you missed that one, go back and listen to it. But Brandon hit me up with a couple of ideas, and one of them, I honestly can't remember if I talked about this here on Kayak Fishing Weekly or not. I remember talking about it on my Instagram page, but I'm gonna talk about a hook file. Uh, I don't remember what I paid for this. It was $5 or less. It's a simple nail file, but it actually works on hooks for situations where, especially something like a spinnerbait or a chatterbait, it's a fairly expensive lure. Uh, but even for a flipping hook, for any type of hook that you're using in the fishing world, you can bang that thing into rocks and dull it. Stick it in a piece of wood and dull it, and this thing can actually put an edge back on. It's handy. You can stick it in your pocket. I'll keep a couple in the black pack. I'll have them in the storage compartments in my Hobie. But yeah, always have one of these guys. It'll make your hooks last longer. And then another tip, and I'm kind of telling on myself here, a mistake that I've found myself making with hooks. Let's say I'm flipping, I'm using a straight shank hook, and I decide, all right, I'm going to switch to something else, maybe a smaller bait. I cut that hook off, I throw it in the bottom of the boat, tie my new one on, and go to fishing it. I'm really bad about going and taking that hook back, drying it off, putting an edge back on it if necessary, and putting it in a box. I have found myself a number of times just with a box full of hooks with the plastic still on it that I just throw in a big box. Don't do that. Just simply taking the plastic off and reusing that hook, putting it back in the pack. Um, again, once it's dry, because you don't want to rust your stuff. But if you do that, you will save yourself a lot of money on hooks throughout the year. So sharpener, and then don't throw all your hooks in a big pile and let them rust. That is going to be our yakking on a budget tip of the week. And now I'm going to see if I can get this queued up. Every time I go to present on here and share screen, it takes forever and I booger it up. I'm going to try and do it a little better here. All right, hopefully that wasn't too bad. For those of you watching or listening, I think I can play the audio here also. I'll hit play, but I was actually, as I was scrolling through some of Brian's content, checking out his recent posts, I remembered something that I saw, a post that he did, collaboration with Blake Abbey, our first guest on KFW that we talked saltwater with, and it's a hilarious little clip. I will play it. Hopefully you guys can hear it.
Oh my gosh!
Oh gosh.
Whoops. Only meant to play it once. My bad. But for anybody who was not watching it, basically that's Blake out there. He's got a sign he's holding up. Shoot, I've closed it out, but it's something along the lines of I can't lie, I just need more money for fishing lovers, which I thought was hilarious. Funny little video, him sitting out on the curb, panhandling with an honest sign that at least I can relate to. So I thought that video was hilarious. I remembered seeing that some months back, but I'd forgotten about it. And yeah, it brought a smile to my face. So Blake Abbey, he's going to be our king of the week for making that funny video. And that's going to do it for this edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. And again, that's going to do it for this year, for 2024 on Kayak Fishing Weekly. So I hope everybody had, again, a Merry Christmas. I hope you had a chance to spend time with family and friends. Hope you have a great New Year's. And I will see you in 2025. And until then, remember to take a kid fishing.